Hello, everyone. We're here today with my friend Donn, and he is in Withville, Virginia. And I just want to welcome him to Hope for the Helpers. And there's lots of reasons why I asked him to come on here and to share some information with everyone, share his story, share some experiences he's had with families that have been affected by substance use disorder and all kinds of addictions out there. And before I take over the whole time, I'm going to just go ahead, Dawn, and ask you to share about yourself and a little bit about what you do in the community and maybe how we met.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be glad to do that and give you a little update along the way.
Okay.
I'm actually retired now
Yes.
and have moved away as retired as one gets. Anyway, pastored in Westville for 20 years. I did retire in June of 2024. I'm now serving a church in Roanoke and kind of a little different transition in life. But in those years there, we did just had a number of folks at the church that seemed to benefit, got connected with the recovery community, ended up doing a celebrate recovery, met you
Hmm.
through that work and was gained the advantage of some of the training that you did. I'd heard a little bit about ACEs and you did some of that training for us. And I went on to do a lot of training in trauma informed care and how trauma affects us, and was also for about 10 of those years a law enforcement chaplain. And it was interesting kind of walking both, shall I say, both sides of that road.
Yep.
It was fascinating that we could have church on Sunday morning and have folks from the law enforcement community and the recovery community, worshiping together. I thought
Hmm.
that was really a great experience. Um, have a little bit of that in my background as well. And I think we all have some trauma and some unhealthy behaviors, and we got into trying to help out with foster care and just being involved in the community in all these different ways. And as I said, it was I always wondered why God put together the group of people He did at the
Hmm.
particular church I pastored.
Uh-huh.
It didn't make a lot of sense to me until we got into not just recovery, but what lies underneath all that, the
Right.
trauma.
Hmm.
We were basically I think we all are a group of folks directly or indirectly affected by trauma, trying to recover
Right.
um, and do that. So
Yes.
um,
And
I
continue
did,
to be. And continue
yeah,
to be.
and continue to be.
Continue to
It
be.
doesn't go away. Yeah, hopefully we make progress, but and the community's changed from time to time, and that's okay. We do that. I did later in life go to college, get a master's degree, and actually did my master's thesis on how the church can be the new family of origin and how that can reshape us into a better image than many of us were shaped into. Um,
Well, tell me a little bit about that specifically because my channel, Hope for the Helpers, is for families that are impacted by substance use disorder of one kind or another, and they have someone that they love, whether it's in their immediate family or it may be a friend or it may be a coworker, some it's somebody that they loved, that they do love, and they are looking for answers to all sorts of things on how to deal with this situation. Tell me what you have found as far as the church is concerned. And because so many churches, I get this with my regular job. I see this all the time, talk to churches, and they really don't know how to handle a family that's going through this. They don't really know where to send somebody or maybe that they do, and I've just gone to the wrong ones. But I'm thinking about how much churches know about substance use disorder, maybe what they need to know. Tell me about the church and their involvement a little bit because that's exactly where you have been for sure.
yeah. Well, obviously, I think not every church is going to be, just like not every part of the community is not going to be willing to participate in the uh it was told to me as you know God had called us into some dark places,
Hmm.
meaning you know
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that, and not everybody is willing or ready or able to hear about that. um, and sometimes we're all tend to we find a little freedom and we can overshare, and so
Hmm.
there's a whole, I think finding the right church is a very difficult thing, but part of what we were involved in doing was trying to help and educate church leaders, trying to share success stories, not just with leaders of churches, but with people, in the congregation.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to create a culture of recovery,
Hmm.
and the fact that, we're all in recovery.
Yeah.
I'll just throw it out there a little bit.
Sure.
My personal story, I have the genetics in my family for addiction. I,
Yeah.
in hindsight, have recognized the addictive behavior in my own life.
Same. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
we're all there. We're, when I drank till everything was gone.
Yeah.
Um, not not just one. So obviously
Right.
that became problematic. I consider
Yeah.
myself very fortunate and blessed, and credit my wife of 45 years now of you know um, my not pursuing that
Hmm.
chemical path too much. However, if you haven't dealt with your trauma, and traumas anytime we feel unsafe, okay, I tell everybody, I'm old. Remember the show Leave It to Beaver?
Yeah.
Uh, and I literally came, I'm the Beaver. I literally came from the Cleaver family. My
Yeah.
mom and dad
I
are,
did.
yeah, still married and all this sort of stuff. That doesn't make us immune to trauma. And then, finding my own unhealthy behaviors, being a workaholic, the problems that caused, kind of being codependent, and needing people to to depend on me in order to find my self-worth, and all the problems with that kind of stuff. um, so I figured out that we're all in recovery.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
The way I cultivated that culture in church was, sin takes a lot of different forms, and we're all in recovery. And just because your behavior isn't chemical, just because it doesn't have immediate consequences, doesn't mean that we don't have trauma and we don't need to deal with it. And, you know, um, all those kind of things. And I found the ACEs, and then I read something on a Facebook memory I shared, that the link between trauma and addiction, and I would say trauma and bad behavior,
Hmm.
is stronger than the link between obesity and diabetes.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say from my own experience that, you know, being overweight is not generally, I don't think anybody sits down and says, I,
No.
I like to eat enough to destroy my body. you
Exactly,
know,
but we all
yeah,
do. Well, not everybody
yeah,
does, but I
well,
mean, I have battled my weight my entire life, and
yeah,
I've been too heavy and I've been too skinny. I've been both because it's just like I go one way or the other. There's never a middle and easy, like, um,
yeah,
there's never a good path in the center for me with anything. It's either I work all the time or work none. I eat
right.
everything, I eat nothing. You know, take too
And
many pills, take none. Yeah.
yeah, so, really, finding a church that's open, finding a leader who will ask, um, for example, instead of telling you what's wrong with you, tell me your story.
Yeah.
Talk about it. I was very free to talk about um, my own struggles and use them so that that other people could then relate to that. We jokingly referred to ourselves as the land of misfit toys. You
Right.
know, we were all kind of cast aside and broken, and here we are. So I think if you can, part of dealing, we talk about stigma a lot, but part of dealing with that is to talk about it in church.
So what would you tell if you were if you had a mother that was looking for a church or looking for a church, or a mother that was already in a church and really, her son, for example, was the person that,
Hmm.
is
Sure.
having some issues. What would you tell her to look for in a church if she's looking for a new church? And number two, what would you tell her if she's already in a church and that church is not recovery friendly, because that's a term, in Tennessee anyway.
Sure.
We have recovery congregations that have been certified by the state of Tennessee as recovery congregations. The state has gone in with their people, and they have a faith-based initiative in Tennessee, and they've gone in and they have trained certain folks in the church, the leaders, etc., on all the different methods for recovery, and, shared with the church that they would be educated about it instead of just thinking, there's only one path to recovery. Now they've got all these things they can know about, and then they
Yeah.
can make their own decision about that, of course. But they become what's called a recovery congregation, a church that's educated about addictions, about the path to recovery, and they are open to those things. There's some churches that um, don't believe in any kind of medication for mental health or addiction or anything like
Sure.
that, and some churches that do. And so I guess I'm asking what you would share with a mother that is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is a question I can't ask anybody but you because you're a pastor. you know, Not many
Well,
people can answer that question.
yeah. Not Look, not every congregation is going to be. And so, I would say to that mother, particularly if she already is part of a church family, I don't often encourage people. The last thing I would encourage is, hey, you need to get out of there,
Yeah.
depending on what they're doing, obviously. But mom, you need a team. You
Hmm.
don't, we tell addicts all the time, you don't, you are not, what do we call that? Terminally unique.
Hmm.
Because everyone thinks, oh, there's nobody that's got it just like I do. And it's not that way for families either. Okay. It affects the whole family.
Hmm.
You're not unique. You need a team. You need a family. If you can find that at your church, I think that's great. If not, find that somewhere.
Hmm.
I've found that most recovery groups like AA that I saw and the people I knew, they weren't real particular about what the first letter was.
Hmm. Yeah.
So Al-Anon, just because your loved one's not the alcoholic, it's the you're the family. Get in there and get some help.
Yeah,
A lot
AA,
of
NA, Al-Anon,
Yeah,
Nar-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, Living Free. There's like a
right,
plethora of resources out there. Pick one. It doesn't matter which side of the
yeah,
fence you're on. Go, because all the information really applies to everyone.
it
You,
does.
hmm.
And I've found that we partnered with AA for a long time, still did, even if we had
Hmm.
Celebrate Recovery,
Hmm.
because do I have a personal belief and conviction about faith and Christ and the way he plays in that? Obviously, I do, yes. But
Hmm.
you can't make any sense out of that until you deal with this
Right.
thing, and whether
Right.
this thing is your chemical use or whether this thing is your loved one's chemical use or this thing is your trauma from dealing with people.
Hmm.
You've got to find. So the first thing I would say is find that support system, try some different stuff, figure out what works with you.
Find a
And I
team.
would say, if you're part of a church, have some conversations with the leadership of that church and see where they are. And perhaps we found we had a couple of key people in the church that were big part of the recovery community.
Hmm.
You know, we used to celebrate their birthdays were their sobriety days,
Yes,
you know,
correct.
and we listed those in the bulletin. And so, if you find some openness to that, you could very well be the one that could help your church do that. Um, you know, a big part of how recovery works, and it works the same way for families, is
Yeah,
don't just show up and absorb everything. You got to
right.
participate. And so maybe you can help your church start that. If your church is not open at all to that, um, you may want to, investigate that. I think what Tennessee has done is wonderful.
Hmm.
Virginia has not done that, but visiting churches and finding a church is not easy. Dealing with a family member who has issues is not easy. So
Right.
there's no big easy ticket, but talk to some people, look at the people. I would say, you can, don't mean to tell you to make a decision by looks, but you can tell a little bit, by the crowd that goes there.
Yeah.
You can check stuff out online, look at what kind of programs they're doing. You can tell a recovery friendly
Hmm.
church, or you can make a recovery friendly church.
Right. Now,
Um,
I had made some questions to ask you, and I don't think we'll get through all of them, but I want to ask you one. It says, from what you've experienced, what do families dealing with addiction go through that most families don't fully understand? What would you say to that?
um, what would I say to that? Um, I think I would say there is I've come to understand grief
Hmm.
as very confused emotions.
Hmm.
Okay. When we usually think about grief as death, the difficult part of a family member who's in active addiction, is that you're grieving a living death, and you want something that the person in recovery may not want. Um, and there's a lot of confused emotions that go along with that. Just like, when a person's sick and they die, we want them to get better, but then we feel this sense of relief when they die, and then we feel
Yes.
guilty about being relieved.
Yes.
So, if grief is really confused emotions, I think you're going to feel a lot of confused emotions. It's okay to feel them, don't bury them. You need to talk about them, but um, and this isn't necessarily something you caused, and it's not necessarily something you can fix. Your best, the best you can bring to the situation is a happy and healthy you.
Right.
Okay.
And we
You
explore
got
that a
to deal.
lot with Hope for the
Yeah,
Helpers. We explore that a lot about, that's sort of like one of the key things that we talk about so much and that I have planned to talk about so much is that the family member or the friend or whoever that one person is, they believe that, they can fix everything. They believe that, what they do, really makes a difference in that this person. And really it starts with the other person. It starts with the person addicted, has to have this desire. But at the same time, that individual, the concerned person, whoever that may be, tends to let themselves, suffer because they don't take care of themselves. They worry about their friend or their loved one. They try to do everything for them and do all these things for that person, spiritually, mentally, physically. And then they're left, that you have to take care of yourself first. And I think I said maybe yesterday on one of my videos, you can't pour from an empty cup. And we all know how that is.
yeah,
You have to keep pouring into yourself all the things that you need so that you can help that other person, in the right ways.
absolutely.
Mhm.
I remember a time when I was pastoring a small church. It wasn't the Wistful congregation, it was a different one, and had like 5 or 6 young couples all in marriage crisis, and wound up with struggles in my own marriage because I was too busy trying to help everybody else.
Yeah.
And it
Hmm.
finally dawned on me that the best way I could help them was to show them
Hmm.
what a good marriage looked like.
Yeah.
I wish I was smart enough to take credit for this quote, but I can't remember where I read it. But when it talks about marriage, You know, you've got to be one before you can become one.
Yes.
So, it's the same thing. You're so busy working on the other person that this person isn't whole, and you've got to be, because you're going to have to deal with some stuff. Okay, when you got a family member and a loved one in recovery, um, when you're helping other families, whatever you're doing, you have to deal with some stuff, and it's going to be some tough stuff.
Yeah.
Particularly, when your family members in addiction, and then they have kids, and then bad stuff starts happening, and there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of anger, resentment, fear, all these tough emotions, and if you're not healthy
Yeah.
physically, emotionally, spiritually, it begins to change you, and then the problem compounds. And it takes it takes tough love,
Mhm.
takes strength, as a friend of mine used to say, an intestinal fortitude.
Yeah,
you know
right.
that I mean, it requires something of you. I can't imagine,
Mhm.
um, you know, dealing with some of that kind of stuff, and having to say, no to some tough things.
Yeah. Mhm.
And you've got to be in a place and have a support system to do that, or you're not going to help your loved
So
one.
let's switch just for a minute from the church
Sure.
s- side to the law enforcement side, where you were served as chaplain for many years. That's correct? That's what it was,
It
right?
is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
So,
chaplain. I actually did a year as an actual deputy, but
okay.
found out
So
pretty quick that wasn't for me.
share with us a little bit about maybe an experience there and what you learned, but also, again, the concerned person that has someone that has found themselves in the justice system, for something they've done because of their addiction. That could be theft, it could be manufacturing, it could be anything. I mean, there's anything. But what kinds of things did you see, and what kinds of things would you recommend to a concerned person that has never dealt with that before and has nowhere, they don't have any idea where to start? The justice system is a whole thing that they've never dealt with. Coming from families like ours, because we've expressed, where we came from.
Right.
And if I had been arrested, my mom and dad would have had no idea what to do. It'd be like, what? I don't know anything about that.
And I'll share a little bit of a
Mhm.
personal story. One time as a young man, I guess I was about 16 anyway, I got arrested for drunk driving. And my mom and dad tell me that's the biggest argument they ever had. Mom thought they should leave me down there, and dad came and got me. And
Yeah.
she says we knew which parent to call when we
Yeah.
wanted to, when we were in trouble. Um, and the whole thing's very overwhelming. But what I took away from that experience and my childhood and being in those kind of troubles was, even though there was discipline and there was consequences, I wouldn't always admit it, but I always knew they loved me.
Right.
Um, I didn't always respond well when they shared that with me. So the first thing I would tell families is, um, fueling. Look, those folks got a job to do. They got a tough job to do. The wheels of justice move terribly slowly. There are flaws in that system. We all know that.
Mhm.
But what your loved one needs in the midst of that is to know that they're loved, and knowing that they're loved sometimes means they know the pain they're causing you.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean giving them everything that they want. Doesn't mean that they need everything they get on their um, jail account. It's heartbreaking. Um, it's a really tough. I've walked through that with mental health. I've walked through that with addiction. We used to say in recovery, you got three choices. And I'd say this would count for emotional stuff as well. It just doesn't happen as quickly. But you have three choices. You can get clean, you can go to jail, or you can die.
Yeah.
and we really wish you'd skip the dying part.
Yeah.
And I would say to families, as tough as it is and all that stuff, jail isn't necessarily the worst thing that could happen
That's
to
right.
your loved one.
Right. Mhm.
As tough as that may be, um, it's not a great environment. Don't sign up, don't go unless you need to. But they really get some time to think. Keep the communication open. Let them know they're loved. Um, Law enforcement isn't your enemy. They got a tough job to do,
They do have a
um,
tough job, and
and they
you
don't
know,
always do it, extremely well. And I've seen the chicken McNugget box 12 inches away from the box of fentanyl patches on the
yeah.
coffee table.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen the searching for the missing little girl, the footprint in the mud where she went into the river and drowned because her parents were, well, her mother anyway, and whoever were, high on some kind of drugs and not supervising her.
Mhm.
And those are tough things to see and continue to do your job. And those people have to do that all the time.
Yeah.
And we really tried hard. And this is a way I'd encourage people, when you're working through the crux of it at the moment, probably not the time to do it, but later on, we used to do things like we had a group of ladies that sewed, we called them Care Bears.
Mhm.
We eventually worked our way up to backpacks, and we made sure that every deputy had something to give the kid. Um, so I'm not saying it's a perfect system and don't blame them, but work through your experience, get the support, and then turn that energy into helping that system get better. I became a law enforcement chaplain because of a nephew, a great nephew that died at 5.5 months old tragically, and they did not have a great experience with law enforcement. And I thought the experience ought to be better. And, so we did death notifications. We dealt more with trauma with officers and stuff than we did actually, criminals. But um, eh, we dealt more with the officers. But there's a whole side to that trauma,
Yeah.
that affects everybody.
Right.
I'm a little bit hypocritical in, the self care part of it because I never took good care of myself. Retired at 62 for that reason. But I'm doing better in retirement than I was. But
Well,
make sure if your loved one winds up in the justice system, make sure that don't cut off the communication. Try to avoid the bitterness. Make sure they know you love them. It's okay that they know you're disappointed and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that, mortgaging your house to bail them out is a great idea.
my final question today is what, and this can be just your own answer, or it can be simple and biblical. What would you share with the concerned person to give them hope? Um, yeah, to give them hope.
Um, eh, I, I thought about this when I had a moment to think about it. And I haven't seen this a lot of other places, although I've read it in a couple of books. What I would say to them is, you are not what you have done, and you are not what has been done to you.
Mhm.
Um, Faith is extremely valuable. We believe Christ died to pay the penalty for our sin, and we have to look at two sides of that.
Mhm.
It's not just the sins we've committed, but it's also the sins that have been committed against us.
Right.
And that hurt, that anger, that betrayal, that fear is all wrapped up in the sin that's going on.
Mhm.
Okay. For
Yep.
whatever reason, whoever's doing it, you are not what you have done, and you are not what has been done to you. You are a new creation in Christ Jesus. There is hope. There is healing, um, even in the face of some of the worst tragedies, I've ever seen. Um, God's still at work. This is
Yes,
not the end. Um, One of my good friends used to say, it'll all work out in the end. And if it's not working out, it's not the end.
that's right.
So
That's right. That's right.
that's a little bit of a trite saying, but I'm really fond of you are not what you have done, and you are not what has been done to you.
Yes.
Let's look at both sides of sin, and let's understand what Christ did for both sides of sin, because we suffer from sins we commit, and we suffer from sins that are committed against us or affect us.
Very good. Well, I just can't thank you enough for sharing with us today. And I'm going to put this on my YouTube channel so that
Oh no.
hopefully, lots of people will see it. But I knew that I wanted to talk with you because of all your different experiences and because you're just the greatest guy and because I hadn't seen you in a long
Well,
time and I wanted to hook up with you and say hello.
very good catching up. I'm becoming a little bit more of a sage and love to talk about this sort of stuff in my retirement. But it has really given me some time to think about and reflect and do some things healthier than I did in doing that. So glad to help anytime. Um,
Oh,
I
I will
rec-
ask you again. We'll do another one. We'll do
okay.
another one.
I'd
I'm going to go
I'd
ahead
love
and
to do one on that book I mentioned to you.
yes, and let's show everyone before I cut the recording off.
Yeah,
Dawn had
you got
mentioned this.
yours handy.
I do. I've
Yes.
got, yeah.
Okay.
This is called You're Not Alone and Hope for Hurting Parents of Troubled
Yeah.
Kids.
Be great.
And then there's also a study guide to go with it. I got too. I got
Yeah,
the study guide for this.
I got the
And
facilitator's guide and the
oh,
study guide.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so what
Um,
I'm finding is, and you can speak to this too, what I'm finding is, even though this is about or for parents of troubled kids, I find that just like with AA, NA, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, all
sure.
the things, all the information that's in here can apply to anyone at any point in their life. It doesn't even have to be, you don't even have to be a person that's loving someone in addiction, or you don't have to be that person that has substance use disorder. All the information in here is so great and good life lessons, just like the Bible. The Bible,
Yep.
it gives you life
Yep.
lessons for any piece and part of your life, any person, any, kind of person. Same
Sure.
thing with these kind of books, that we're talking about here. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I got mine on Amazon, and I think they were about $8 or $9 a piece. I got used ones and it
Yeah.
looks brand new. So those are things that people
Sure.
can get.
And I think there's even grant money out there for if somebody wants to start a group and
Yeah.
get the books, but become part of something like that. And I think for hurting families too, learn about the 12-step process.
Yeah.
And look, there's all different variations of it, but I think it will help you understand what your loved one's going through and what they need to go through.
And I'll show these two books while we're still recording. This is Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
just, it is, you can
The big
get
book.
the big book. It's called the big book. It has the 12 steps in here. This
Yep.
is, again, you do not have to be that person or that family
Right.
or anything. Great information, just like the Bible. All things really relate to everyone. And then also I've got the Al-Anon Path to Recovery. This is specifically for family members, but all the information can apply to anyone. Again, got
All right. Yeah.
both of these
I got
on.
up and was looking at another one. Those are great. We did. I'm trying to think if it was 12 steps to a closer walk with Christ or something. There's a plethora of those things, but
Yeah,
it familiarizes you with the concepts and what your loved one's going to need. So
yeah.
I definitely recommend to people they do some. If you're in the throes of the pain, then Hope for Hurting Parents is relatable to it. Don't have to be a parent, relatable to a ton of situations. If you're coping fairly well,
Yeah. Hmm.
then I would encourage you to learn about the 12 steps. And remember, you are not what you have done. You are not what has been done to you. God paid the price for all that already. We're all recovering from it.
Thank you, Donn.